Michael, who discovered his wife Melanie's infidelity with their friend Frank, experiences shock and betrayal. To restore his dignity, he devises a revenge plan with the help of the attractive Rhiannon, forcing Frank and Melanie to face the consequences of their actions. You can discover a great deal about a person by stepping onto a tennis court with them. In my experience, men who show good manners and sportsmanship while playing usually carry those qualities into their daily lives. On the other hand, I once saw a man exhibit the most appalling behavior imaginable toward his best friend during a match. When I later found out he had abandoned his family and run off with another man's wife, it hardly came as a shock. Then there's Frank Calhoun. He's a big guy. He even played football for Georgia Tech until a knee injury ended his time on the team. After his orthopedic surgeon patched him up, Frank shifted his focus to tennis. He plays the game like he's still on the gridiron, serving thunderous shots and blasting balls straight at the net player from the baseline. But I can beat him. My strategy is to move up to the net, putting pressure on him to hit past me. More often than not, he'll try too hard and slam the ball all the way to the back fence. And let's just say his line calls are always in his favor. Because of this, Frank is always eager to challenge me. He hates losing to a little guy. I'm not actually little, I'm 6 feet tall, but compared to Frank, who's got 3 inches and 75 pounds on me, I guess I seem small. I'm not particularly enthusiastic about playing with Frank, but he's not easy to dodge since we both live in the Eden Point subdivision north of Atlanta. In this tennis-crazy city, our neighborhood was designed around a clubhouse equipped with a swimming pool and numerous tennis courts. With so many residents involved in teams through the Atlanta Lawn Tennis Association, it's tough to avoid someone like Frank. On the upside, I also get to play with a lot of genuinely nice people, like my mixed doubles partner, Penny Pennington. I met Penny through my wife, Melanie, who teaches Pilates. Many folks in Eden Point attend Melanie's classes, Penny included. Unfortunately, Melanie isn't interested in tennis. But when she heard Penny was looking for a partner, she introduced us, and Penny and I have been teaming up for about a year now. Today's match was scheduled at a club all the way in Stone Mountain, so I offered to drive Penny to save on gas. Knowing that weekend traffic could pile up, we gave ourselves a solid 45 minutes to get there. As she stepped out of her house, I found myself wondering once again why Penny was still single. Of course, her story is a tragic one. She lost her husband in a car accident 3 years back. After a long period of mourning, she joined Melanie's Pilates class as part of her healing process. She also returned to tennis, a sport she'd played in high school. All this physical activity left her looking fit and toned. She's in her early 30s, with dark hair and a striking appearance, so I would have expected men to flock to her. But Penny keeps telling Melanie she just hasn't met the right one yet. "Hey, Penny," I said as she slid into my car. "Ready to take them down today?" She flashed me a confident grin. "You bet, Michael. I've been waiting a long time to get another shot at these two." We were discussing our tactics as I merged onto I-285, but our conversation was cut short when my cell phone rang. "Hi, Robert. You're kidding? It's perfect here. Damn. Okay, we'll reschedule." Penny gave me a curious look as I took the next exit and headed back. "That was our opponent," I explained. "He said a rainstorm just blew through and the courts are too wet to play." Atlanta is well known for those sudden downpours that can soak one area while leaving another spot just a few miles away untouched. Penny looked disappointed. "Shoot, I was really looking forward to this." "Tell you what," I said. "Why don't we head back to the club? We can still get some practice in, and maybe we'll find someone else willing to play." As I pulled up to the main entrance of Eden Point, I turned onto the road leading to my house. "I just need to stop in and grab my check for this quarter's club fees," I told Penny. "It'll only take a minute." I parked by the curb and hurried to the front door. I'd filled out the check the night before and left it on my dresser, so I knew right where it was. But as I walked down the hallway, I heard muffled voices coming from the master bedroom, tones I wasn't expecting to hear. It sounded like Melanie's voice. "What's going on?" I thought. Curious and uneasy, I crept down the hall and peeked through the doorway. I froze in disbelief. There was Melanie, with Frank Calhoun. The scene before me left no doubt about what was happening. They were together in a way that shattered everything I believed. It felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I stood there, stunned, unable to move or even process what I was seeing. Everything had changed in an instant, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. A wave of nausea hit me, and I stumbled back from the doorway. My mind raced with conflicting emotions: anger, betrayal, confusion. My first instinct was to storm in and confront them, but what would that accomplish? I couldn't think clearly. Then I remembered Penny waiting in the car. I have to get her home first, I thought, forcing myself to move. In a daze, I walked back down the hall and out the front door. My stomach churned as I approached the car, and Penny's concerned face stared back at me through the windshield. I got in, started the engine, and stared straight ahead. I must have looked terrible. "Are you all right, Michael?" Penny asked, her voice filled with worry. I couldn't answer. I just gripped the wheel and drove, heading straight to her place. When we arrived, I parked the car and, still not looking at her, said, "I'm sorry, Penny. I won't be able to join you today." "What's going on, Michael? What happened?" she asked, alarmed. I stayed silent, so she reached over, switched off the ignition, took the keys, and got out. She came around to my side and opened the door. "You're not going anywhere until you explain," she said firmly. Reluctantly, I got out and followed her inside. She handed me a glass of water and sat down beside me. "Tell me, Michael, what did you see?" she asked gently. I took a shaky breath, my voice barely audible. "It was Melanie and Frank," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Penny looked at me, confused. "What do you mean?" "They were in the bedroom," I whispered. "Together." Her eyes widened in shock. "No, that can't be true. Melanie wouldn't—" "She did," I interrupted, my voice trembling with emotion. "I saw them, there's no mistake." She placed a comforting hand on mine. "I'm so sorry, Michael. I can't imagine how this feels." Anger and pain surged through me. And it had to be Frank Calhoun of all people. How could she betray me like this? "I guess that explains why Frank started taking Melanie's Pilates class," Penny said quietly, piecing things together. "What?" I asked sharply. "She never told me that." Penny looked apologetic. "I didn't think anything of it. I'm so sorry." I sighed, my anger momentarily giving way to exhaustion. "It's not your fault. I trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. After a long silence, I stood up. "I need to go back. I need answers." "Promise me you won't do anything reckless," Penny said, her eyes filled with concern. "I just want to talk," I assured her, though my heart raced with adrenaline. "Let me know what happens," she said, squeezing my hand one last time. "And remember, you're not alone." I nodded, thanked her, and left. As I drove home, I braced myself for what lay ahead. My mind swirled with questions, each one more painful than the last. Whatever Melanie had to say, I knew this moment would change everything. When I walked through the kitchen door, Melanie must have heard me. She appeared to greet me. She wore a robe, her hair wrapped in a towel. "You're home early," she said, sounding almost cheerful. "How was the match?" "We got rained out," I replied curtly. "Oh, I'm sorry you didn't get to play," she said. "I bet Penny was disappointed." I stared at her, not interested in small talk. "They called about the rain just after we left," I said softly. She blinked but kept her face neutral. "I came back to the house," I said, my heart pounding. I saw you with Frank." Her response wasn't one I had expected. "I'm sorry you had to see that," she said calmly. "That's it?" I asked, stunned. "You're sorry I caught you being disloyal? Don't you have any apology for breaking my trust? How long has this been going on? Aren't you even going to explain?" She folded her arms and sighed. "Sit down, Michael," she said, gesturing toward the breakfast table. "I'll stand," I snapped. "Suit yourself," she said, taking a seat. I stood there, shocked by how composed she seemed. "Listen, Michael," she began. "We were going to tell you soon anyway. I guess this just forces the issue. I'm leaving you. Frank and I care about each other, and I'm moving in with him. We'll figure out the rest when the divorce is finalized." Feeling suddenly weak, I decided to sit. I didn't trust my legs to hold me upright. Before I could come up with a response, she got up and said, "Wait here," then headed back toward our bedroom. A short while later, she returned holding a stack of papers, which she pushed across the table toward me. "This doesn't need to get complicated," she said. "I'm not asking you for anything. I've taken some of the savings, but since I'm leaving you the house, that's only fair. This deal is a lot better than anything you'd get if this went to court. But if you prefer, we can go that route." I stared down at the stack in front of me. A divorce petition. "You've already consulted a lawyer?" I asked, stunned. "What about our marriage? What about the years we've shared?" "I'm sorry, Michael, I never planned for this to happen, it just did. Just accept it. It is what it is." "Accept it?" I shouted. "Accept that my supposedly loving wife is walking away for someone else? Accept that our marriage is over?" She stood up. "I'm disappointed, Michael. I expected a more rational reaction." She turned and headed back to the bedroom. I remained seated at the table, looking at the divorce papers, trying to comprehend what was going on. If anyone had asked me that morning, I would have said I loved my wife and that our marriage was solid. And now this afternoon I learned she's leaving me for someone else. It was almost too much to process. In the silence, I could hear the faint beep of a cell phone and snippets of a hushed conversation. He knows now. As expected. That might help. When she emerged again, she was fully dressed and holding an overnight bag. "Now that this is out in the open, I won't stay here tonight. Frank's coming to pick me up. We'll come back later to get the rest of my things." "So you're just leaving?" I asked, incredulous. "It has to be this way," she said. "Fine," I said bitterly. "What should I tell our friends?" She sighed. "Look, Michael, this isn't about anyone else. We're not hiding. We'll explain things as needed, but there's no reason to create unnecessary drama." At that moment, a car horn sounded outside. Melanie glanced out the window. "Frank's here," she said. "I'm leaving." Before closing the door behind her, she looked back at me. "Just sign the papers, Michael. The sooner you do, the better it will be for everyone." Then she was gone. I have no idea how long I sat there. My emotions flipped back and forth like a storm. One moment I was furious. The next I was remembering happier days and feeling devastated. I tried telling myself I'd done everything I could to be a good husband, then wondered if I'd missed something. I kept insisting that I was better off without her, until the silence of the empty house crept in and overwhelmed me. A notification on my cell phone startled me. I answered quickly. Maybe deep down I was hoping it was Melanie. It wasn't. It was Penny. "How are you holding up, Michael?" she asked. "Not great," I admitted. "She's left me." "I know," Penny said softly. "You know?" I asked, surprised. "How did you find out?" "I'm sorry, Michael," she said. "Frank's been up at the clubhouse talking about it." Great, I thought bitterly. It's already public knowledge. On Sunday, I called the captain of the men's team. There was no way I'd show my face there. "I'm sorry, Joe," I told him. "You'll have to take me off the lineup today. I've got some personal stuff to handle." "Yeah, I heard," he said sympathetically. "I'm really sorry. Good luck, man." I thanked him, but I knew luck wasn't on my side. I spent the entire day indoors. I guess you could say I was avoiding the world, although I hated admitting it. The TV was on, showing some sports event, but I wasn't really watching. My mind kept drifting back to Melanie and our relationship. When had everything started to go wrong? I felt sure she cared for me when we got married right after college. We dated throughout our senior year. I proposed during Christmas break. She'd majored in health and physical education, and her passion for fitness and wellness was inspiring. From the moment I met her, I was drawn to her energy and kindness. Married life came easily to us. I got a great job in Atlanta, and she found work teaching fitness classes. After a few years, we'd saved enough for a down payment on a house. We found exactly what we wanted in a new community called Eden Point. I had genuinely believed we were happy at Eden Point. I'd earned several promotions at my job, and Melanie had decided to pursue her own venture. By that point, we'd saved enough money to lease a space in a local strip mall for her studio, and her business took off. Our savings continued to grow. We had a wide network of friends and acquaintances, especially at Eden Point, and we'd even begun talking about starting a family in a year or two. Our intimacy life had slowed a bit, but that didn't strike me as unusual. I was busy with my work, and teaching Pilates every day would tire anyone out. Looking back, I realized things had really changed over the past 6 months, though I hadn't noticed it at the time. I also recalled how Melanie had sometimes seemed distant, as if her mind were somewhere else. Still, when we were intimate, it felt as good as ever to me, and I had assumed it was the same for her. Clearly, I was mistaken. I mentally berated myself. How could I have been so clueless that I didn't see her getting involved with someone else? How did I miss that she was falling out of love with me and in love with Frank Calhoun? I guess when you love and trust someone, you don't go looking for signs of betrayal. No, I thought wryly, you just stand there until they hit you upside the head with the truth. On Monday morning, I arrived at work early to try to get ahead of my responsibilities. Around 9, I called my attorney's office to schedule an appointment. When the secretary asked why I wanted to see him, I didn't feel like explaining about Melanie, so I said I needed to revise my will. She came back on the line and told me he could see me right after lunch. At the law office, Jonathan met me in the lobby. He'd been our classmate in college, and he was the one who handled our wills back when Melanie and I decided to have them drawn up. Once we were settled in his office, he gave me a concerned look. "Is everything all right, Michael? You mentioned needing to change your will. You or Melanie aren't ill, I hope." "Thanks for asking, Jonathan," I said. "It's not that kind of situation." I handed him the papers Melanie had given me on Saturday. He clicked his tongue as he read through them and, upon finishing, looked up at me. "I'm truly sorry to hear this, Michael. Do you think there's any chance you two could work things out?" "I doubt it. She's already moved out of our home and in with her boyfriend. She said they plan to marry as soon as our divorce is final." He shook his head, looking surprised. "I'd never have seen this coming. You two always seemed like such a perfect couple." Then he shifted into a more professional demeanor. "Given the circumstances, as your attorney, I strongly advise you to sign this agreement right away." "So that's it?" I said bitterly. "Just like that, 10 years of marriage gone?" He shook his head with understanding. "In situations like this, Michael, you have to set your emotions aside and think rationally. From what I can tell, Melanie's offer is quite generous, far better than what you might get if you choose to fight her on it. Maybe she's feeling guilty, but more likely she wants to give you a strong incentive to finalize things quickly so she can move on and marry her new partner. While it may seem like you're letting her win, if the marriage is truly over, this is probably the best outcome you can hope for." I realized he was right. After everything she'd done, I didn't want to stay married anyway. Still, it felt as if she and Frank had beaten me at some secret game I hadn't known I was playing. Jonathan's voice grew sympathetic again. Listen, Michael, I know Melanie's attorney. If you sign these papers, we can get the settlement agreement filed with the court right away. That will more or less lock in what she's offered. Then, if she ends up having second thoughts and tries to come back, and if you're willing, you'll have 30 days to halt the divorce. I knew I wouldn't be taking her back. Can I borrow your pen? I asked. When I got back to the office, I headed straight for Human Resources. I needed to update my health insurance, my 401k, and all the other benefits that were tied to having a spouse. The clerk who assisted me seemed to know exactly what forms I needed. As I signed them, I caught him looking at me. At least I won't have to make a formal announcement in the office, I thought dryly. On my way home that evening, I picked up some takeout from a local restaurant. When I got there, I discovered Melanie had come by during the day and taken whatever she wanted. Naturally, her cosmetics were gone, but I was surprised she'd left some clothes behind. On closer inspection, I realized they were outfits she never wore anymore. Great. I get to haul these to Goodwill, I thought grimly. A closer look revealed that the bedroom wasn't the only place she'd scavenged. Our good china and most of our wedding gift serving pieces were missing. In the kitchen, several utensils and our best carving knives had disappeared. Some furniture was gone, and when I checked the den, large sections of our CD and DVD collections had also vanished. While going through what remained, I saw that she'd left our wedding album intact. Strangely, that felt even more depressing than the items she took, like she wanted to erase every trace of our life together. I put my takeout in the refrigerator. I'd lost my appetite after seeing how thoroughly she'd cleaned us out. I made a mental note to get the locks changed. How do you go from being happily married to a lonely divorced man in just 3 days? I asked myself. The whole thing seemed so unfair. For the next week, I isolated myself, arriving at work early and leaving late. Otherwise, I stayed home. The humiliation of having Frank Calhoun steal my wife was agonizing, and knowing I could do nothing about it was almost unbearable. I won't lie, I considered violent revenge, smashing him with a bat or using brass knuckles. I even imagined hitmen and car bombs. But then I'd snap back to reality. Why wreck my own life over a womanizer and a wife who couldn't keep her legs together? By Friday, I decided enough was enough. I hadn't done anything wrong, so there was no reason to hide. I called Penny. "Hey, partner, don't we have a tennis match scheduled this weekend?" I asked, trying to sound upbeat. "Oh, Michael, I'm so glad you called," she said quickly. "I thought about reaching out, but I figured you might want some space." "Thanks, Penny," I replied, my tone softening. "It's been a tough week." I told her the whole story, then asked what was happening in Eden Point that I'd missed. She hesitated before admitting that we were the talk of the neighborhood. "You'd think they'd find something else to talk about," I said sharply. "They might," Penny said. "But Frank and Melanie haven't exactly been discreet. They've been at the clubhouse every night since Saturday. Frank's practically bragging that the better man won, and Melanie is hanging all over him like a smitten teenager." I could hear Penny's anger. "It's revolting, Michael. I quit Melanie's Pilates class immediately and told her I couldn't be her friend anymore." Her loyalty gave me a small lift. "What about everyone else, Penny? What are they saying?" I asked. "It's what you'd expect," she said. "Some people are upset with Frank and Melanie and keep their distance. Others, Frank's usual entourage, are praising his prowess. But most folks find the whole thing just sad and uncomfortable, and they try to avoid getting involved." I'd known this would be the case, but a part of me had hoped the community would cast them out. Still, I refused to let my disappointment dictate my life. "Either way, I'm not going to spend the rest of my life in hiding," I told Penny. "We're on the tennis schedule Saturday, And unless you'd rather not, I plan on showing up and playing with my partner." "I'm glad, Michael," she said warmly. "You can count on me." On Saturday, I intentionally arrived at the courts a bit late, hoping to dodge unwanted conversations. It didn't help much. As I approached the tennis pavilion, I felt everyone's eyes on me. I understood their curiosity, but I hated feeling like the center of a spectacle. As soon as she spotted me, our mixed doubles team captain hurried over. "Michael, I'm really sorry," she blurted. "The other team just changed their lineup at the last minute. Some matches have already begun, so there's nothing I can do now. If you want to back out, I'll understand." "What are you talking about, Mary?" I asked, puzzled. "I don't get it." "It's Frank," she explained. "You and Penny are set to play against him and his partner." Great, I thought bitterly. The absolute last person I wanted to face. Right then, Penny approached. When she realized what was happening, her face went pale. She pulled me aside and whispered, "We don't have to go through with this, Michael. It's not a big deal. We can just forfeit and face someone else next week." "No," I said firmly, my voice loud enough to make Penny flinch. "I'm not going to spend the rest of my life avoiding that jerk. If I have to deal with him eventually, I might as well start now." Penny gave me a worried look, but I turned back to Mary. "It's fine," I told her. "Penny and I are ready to play." The match was a disaster. I played worse than I had in years, and my anger threw Penny off her game as well. Frank, on the other hand, was playing brilliantly. His powerful ground strokes were screaming over the net like bullets from a gun. To make it worse, he was taunting me the entire time. After one feeble return, he shouted, "Come on, Michael, you can hit harder than that." When I sent another weak shot his way, he gloated, "Your wife can hit harder than that." "Oh, wait, my mistake. You don't have a wife." His insults made my blood boil. Adding insult to injury, the match had drawn a crowd. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Melanie standing by the fence. Though she cringed at some of Frank's comments, she never looked in my direction. At one point, after I sent a weak second serve over the net, Frank slammed the ball directly at Penny. It struck her shoulder and nearly knocked her down. Furious, I rushed up to the net, racket raised, ready to make him pay, but Penny grabbed my arm, begging me not to go after him. "It was a fair shot," she insisted. "I'm okay, not hurt. It's just part of the game." I glared at Frank as he pretended to adjust his shoelaces, then stalked back to my position, seething with rage. The final score was a humiliating 6-2, 6-1. As I approached the net to shake hands, Frank's partner looked mortified by his behavior and silently apologized as she took my hand. Frank, however, didn't bother with any courtesy. He strolled right up, didn't offer a handshake, and said, "That was a blast. Let's do it again whenever you feel like another beating." Then, making a point, he turned away and gave Melanie a long, showy kiss across the fence. I'm not sure what Penny saw in my expression, but she grabbed my arm and pulled me off the court. "He's trying to get under your skin, Michael. He wants you to lose it and start a fight. Don't let him have that satisfaction. Please, for me." I slumped down on the bleachers, and someone handed me a cup of ice water. After a few sips, I poured the rest over my head. I couldn't have felt worse. I apologized to Penny for my terrible performance. She tried to reassure me, but I just headed to my car and drove home. Once there, I tossed my clothes into the hamper and spent a solid half hour under the shower's spray. When the water ran cold, I stepped out, dried off, and collapsed onto my bed, simmering with anger and disgust. I knew why I'd lost. I'd let Frank get under my skin. Realizing that only made me angrier. He'd gotten to me, and he'd gotten to Melanie too in his own way. One way or another, he'd turned himself into the winner. I vowed that I wasn't going to tolerate any more of his abuse, or Melanie's. I'd find a way to turn the tables. Now I just needed to figure out how. Lying on my bed, I remembered something my old tennis coach used to say: play to your opponent's weakness. It made sense in theory, but how could I use it here? I know myself well enough to trust that once I start thinking through a problem, my mind keeps working on it even if I set it aside. In fact, I've often found that leaving a problem for a while helps bring solutions into clearer focus later. So I mulled it over for a bit, then decided to put it out of my mind. I spent most of Sunday catching up on the yard work I'd been ignoring. By nightfall, I was tired enough to fall asleep easily. When I got to work the following day, a possible solution came to me. It might be expensive, I thought, but if it actually works, it'll be worth every penny. Around mid-morning, I phoned one of our top sales guys. "Hey, Jerry," I said when he picked up. "Any chance you could have lunch with me today? My treat?" "Sure, Michael, especially if you're buying." We met at a bar and grill I know. Nothing fancy, kinda run down, but the food's excellent. Once we'd placed our orders, Jerry glanced over at me. "Hey, Michael, I was really sorry to hear about you and Melanie. I honestly thought everything was going great between you two." "Yeah, so did I, Jerry." "So did I. Actually, that's part of why I wanted to talk to you." "Of course, Michael. Happy to help however I can." "Okay, Jerry, here's what I need to know. When you're entertaining important clients, have you ever hired an escort service?" He gave me a strange look. "No, Michael, absolutely not. That's against company policy, and I wouldn't risk it." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Jerry, this isn't about work, and we're not on the clock. This is strictly personal, if you catch my meaning." He studied me for a moment, then a look of understanding crossed his face. "Oh, I get it," he said. "It's been a while for you. Your wife left, and you've been out of the dating scene." He paused, then leaned in closer. "Sure, I know one of the best services in town. But Michael, they only deal with big spenders. The women they provide are incredible, but it's going to cost you." I gave him a confident smile. "Let me worry about that. Just tell me how to get in touch and what to expect." Over burgers and beer, he gave me all the details. That afternoon, I felt a knot of nerves as I reviewed my lunch notes. Was I doing the right thing? Then I remembered Frank's smug taunts and the icy look in Melanie's eyes when she announced she was leaving. I decided to go for it. I dialed the number Jerry had given me. A pleasant male voice answered. "Hello. How may I help you?" "I'd like to speak to Mr. Henry Miller," I said, following Jerry's instructions. "This is Mr. Miller," the voice replied. "What are you looking for?" "Something from the Grove Press," I said, just as I'd been told. "May I have your name, sir?" I thought about lying, but Jerry had warned me that honesty was crucial. "They worry about the Vice Squad," he had said. "They verify everything." So I gave my real name. "Are you calling from your office?" Mr. Miller asked. "Yes," I answered. "But this is a personal matter, nothing to do with my company." "I understand, sir. Could I have your company's main switchboard number, please?" "Sure," I replied. "But wouldn't you rather have my direct line?" "No," he said. "I'll call the main number and ask for you. After that, we can proceed." Smart move, I thought. If he calls and reaches the operator, he'll know it's a legitimate business line and not a police front. If I get patched through, he'll know I really work there. I gave him the switchboard number and he immediately hung up. A few minutes later, my phone rang and the operator transferred a call, Mr. Miller again. "Now, may I have your cell number?" he asked. "We may need to reach you after hours." I gave it to him and he continued. "Now that we've confirmed who you are, please tell me how we can be of service. I'm looking for a very special companion who can be available for multiple events over the span of a month or more." "That's unusual," he said thoughtfully. We don't normally commit for that long, but it might be possible. It will be expensive." He quoted a figure that made my stomach flip. I swallowed hard. "That's acceptable, Mr. Miller." "Excellent. Any particular requirements?" "Yes," I said. "She has to look like a goddess." He chuckled. "Beauty is subjective, sir, but I think we can find someone who meets your standards." He paused. "Do you have a pen?" After I confirmed I did, he gave me their website's address, which I noticed started with HTTPS. Secure. Then, much to my amusement, he told me the username I should enter was Anais Nin, followed by a numerical password. "Please understand," he added, "that both the username and password will change after you make your choice. This is for your protection as well as ours." After I acknowledged that I understood, he continued, "Now regarding payment, sir. Once you've made your choice and scheduled her session, your credit card will be charged the agreed-upon amount. Additionally, we expect our clients to personally reward our companions. If all goes well, we suggest a 25% gratuity." I did some quick mental arithmetic and thought, this better pay off or I'll be broke and embarrassed. "Very good, sir. When you're ready to pick your companion, please go to our website. You can finalize all other arrangements there. Good day, sir." With that, the call ended. I waited until I got home that evening to access the website Henry had given me. The homepage identified the company only as Capricorn Services and featured the tagline, "Catering to the needs of the most discerning clients." Using the username and password Henry had provided granted me entry, and a new window opened that looked like something straight out of a Victoria's Secret catalog. All the women displayed were so stunning that I found myself wondering why they weren't pursuing modeling careers instead of working as ESQRTs. In fact, I even considered the possibility that these images were stolen from some modeling site as a bait-and-switch scheme. But my friend Jerry had insisted Capricorn was legit, so I decided to trust his word. I had assumed I would choose a blonde, but I was unexpectedly drawn to the photo of a woman with dark, shoulder-length hair and impulsively clicked on Rhiannon. A confirmation popped up, assuring me that Rhiannon would reach out within 24 hours to arrange our meeting. I then entered my credit card details. After the payment information was verified, the screen went blank and I was abruptly logged out. Out of curiosity, I tried to return to the Capricorn site, but the welcome screen no longer recognized my username and password. After a second attempt, I was booted back to my home page. I was impressed by their security measures and took it as an encouraging sign. If they were that careful, maybe their service really was as exceptional as Jerry had suggested. The next day, I was on edge waiting for Rhiannon's call. I even thought about canceling. This plan of mine would be expensive, and there was no guarantee it would succeed. But when I entered the break room to grab some coffee, two secretaries who had been chatting fell silent and avoided my gaze. It was obvious who they'd been talking about. The sting of being the subject of office gossip hardened my resolve. No matter what, I wouldn't remain a helpless victim if I could do something about it. It wasn't until after dinner that my cell phone rang. When I answered, a melodic voice said, "Hi, Michael, this is Rhiannon. I'm looking forward to meeting you." I swallowed hard and suggested we have dinner to discuss my request. She agreed, and I proposed the same small, dimly lit grill where Jerry and I had eaten, a place far enough from Eden Point that I wouldn't risk running into anyone I knew. She laughed softly. "How intriguing! I don't believe I've had the pleasure of dining there before. I look forward to it." Then she hung up. Here we go, I thought. The grill wasn't busy that weeknight, which suited me perfectly. Its low lighting worked in my favor. Yet when she walked through the door, it was as if a spotlight shone directly on her. She spotted me as I rose nervously and approached with confidence, extending her hand. "Hello, Michael." she said in that musical tone of hers. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." We sat, and I must have been staring, because she laughed and asked, "Well, how do I look?" We've all seen beautiful stars on the big screen or models in magazines. They're gorgeous but somehow not real. Now I was face to face with that kind of stunning beauty, and the effect was astounding. Her dark eyes, high cheekbones, pouty lips, the way her hair framed her face, her athletic yet feminine figure. I could list every detail, but the truth is I was momentarily speechless, lost in silent awe. She smiled, breaking the silence. "So I'll take that as your approval," she said. "Oh, yes, sorry," I blurted. For a second, I trailed off, feeling foolish. Just then, the waitress appeared to take our orders, sparing me further embarrassment. I don't recall what I ordered, but Rhiannon chose a green salad with the dressing on the side. As the waitress wrote down her choice, I could see she'd fallen under Rhiannon's spell, too. She kept eyeing her until, at last, she blurted out, "Aren't you on TV?" Rhiannon offered a gentle smile. "No, I'm afraid not," she replied. The waitress walked away, muttering to herself. That brief exchange helped me think more clearly. I looked at Rhiannon, intrigued. "I'll bet that happens a lot." She nodded with easy confidence. "Yes, pretty frequently. Can I ask something? Why aren't you on television or modeling instead of, well, what you do now?" I managed, stumbling over my words near the end. "I've considered it," she said, "but that world's cutthroat. I might look good to you, but in that business I'd just be another pretty face. Making it big there is about as likely as a basketball player getting into the NBA. In this line of work, though, I stand out. And unlike acting or modeling, I didn't have to struggle for years. From day one, I was making top dollar. By the time my looks fade, I'll have saved enough to live off my investments for the rest of my life. And if I'm lucky, maybe I'll find a wealthy man who doesn't mind my past and wants a trophy wife." I couldn't help nodding. I didn't exactly approve of her career choice, but I had to admit she approached it logically. Our meals arrived. After serving Rhiannon, the waitress lingered, peering at her again. "Are you sure you're not on TV? I'm almost certain I've seen you before." Rhiannon shook her head. "I'm pretty sure I'd remember if I had been," she said. I struggled not to laugh as the waitress hurried away, clearly flustered. Once we began eating, Rhiannon studied me closely. "So, Michael," she said, "why don't you give me a sense of what you're trying to do here?" Henry implied it was something a bit unusual. I blushed and started telling her my story. When I described my conversation with Melanie after finding her and Frank in bed, Rhiannon gave me a sympathetic look. "That was really harsh," she said. Hearing about Frank's behavior made her nod knowingly. "I've encountered plenty of men like him." She dabbed at her mouth and then folded her hands. "So what exactly do you want to accomplish, and how do I fit into your plan?" For the next 15 minutes, I explained what I hoped to achieve in the coming month. When I finished, I confessed my doubts. "But I can't just stand by and let them roll right over me. Now that I've met you, I'm starting to think this might actually work." She grinned broadly. What a lovely compliment. Leaning in, she said, "You know what? I think I'm going to enjoy this." "Great," I said, genuinely excited. I reached out to shake her hand, sealing the agreement. She laughed and gave me a firm handshake in return. "To partners in crime," she said, her smile playful. Then she adjusted her posture in some subtle way, and suddenly her presence radiated pure intimacy energy. I realized with some embarrassment that I was visibly aroused. "Well," she purred, her voice low and seductive, "now that our business is settled, how about we move to a more private setting for the recreational portion?" My throat went dry. I took a sip of water before answering. No, I managed. Tonight's just for getting acquainted. Her lips curved into a crooked smile. You don't find me attractive? Oh, God, no, I blurted. I mean, yes. That's not it at all. It's just that I need to stay focused on what we're doing here. Getting involved with you that way might complicate things. But I do have the extra payment we agreed on. I slid an envelope filled with large bills across the table. She accepted it solemnly and tucked it into her purse. Then, altering her posture once more, that intense intimacy aura receded. I think I understand, Michael, she said quietly, tilting her head to study me. You're an interesting man. I believe I'm really going to enjoy this little adventure. With that, she stood and departed, leaving me sitting in the booth. I felt strangely drained. She's quite a woman, I thought. We had planned the start of Operation Honey Trap for Saturday afternoon. The Atlanta heat was already rising, and I was counting on a large crowd at the Eden Point pool. I was a bit on edge, wondering if Rhiannon would actually show up. But a little after noon, a BMW Z4 pulled into my driveway. She arrived at my door carrying a small bag. When I raised an eyebrow, she said, "My swimwear." She glanced around, taking in the neighborhood, and smiled. "So this is the suburbs. Do you like it here?" I frowned. I did, until recently. She patted my cheek reassuringly. "Don't worry. We're going to fix that." We parted ways at the clubhouse to get ready for the pool. According to our plan, I changed first and picked out 2 lounge chairs next to a small table shaded by an umbrella. I had just settled in when I noticed the tall figure of Frank Calhoun heading in my direction. "Well, Michael," he said in a loud voice, "I'm surprised to see you relaxing by the pool. I thought you'd be working on your tennis game." I kept my tone calm. "Not today. My girlfriend and I are just here to enjoy the pool and some sunshine." Frank raised an eyebrow. "Oh, a girlfriend. I'd love to meet her." By now, people nearby had taken an interest in our exchange, which didn't bother me in the least. "Well, you're in luck, Frank," I replied, nodding toward the women's locker room door. "Here she comes now." Everyone's attention turned as Rhiannon stepped out. She wore a sleek, stylish one-piece swimsuit that shimmered slightly in the sunlight, catching the eye of more than a few onlookers. Her confident stride and warm smile radiated charm as she approached. She slipped her arm through mine and greeted me with a light kiss on the cheek. "You found the perfect spot for us," she said sweetly, then turned to Frank. "And who might this be?" I introduced them. "Rhiannon, this is Frank. Frank, meet my girlfriend, Rhiannon." Frank quickly composed himself and extended a hand. "Welcome to Eden Point," he said politely. "If there's anything you need, just let me know." Rhiannon gave him a gracious smile. "That's so kind of you." "Thank you." When Frank lingered a moment too long, she gently teased, "You can let go of my hand now." "Oh," he said, flustered. "I'll leave you two to it. Nice meeting you, Rhiannon." He walked off, glancing back once or twice. Rhiannon and I settled into our lounge chairs. She leaned over and whispered, "I think that went rather well." "You were great," I told her with a smile. She returned the smile and planted a quick, friendly kiss on my cheek. We spent the next couple of hours enjoying the sunny day. A few members of my tennis team stopped by to say hello. I introduced them to Rhiannon, and she chatted with ease, making everyone feel welcome. Her warmth and charisma seemed to captivate everyone who met her. At one point, I leaned toward her and joked, "You'd make a great politician." She laughed softly and said, "In a way, I'm already practicing," giving me a playful wink that made us both laugh. Once the commotion died down, she leaned toward me again. "Which one is she?" she asked. I knew exactly who she meant, so I pointed Melanie out on the opposite side of the pool. "Perfect," she said. "Leave this to me." She slipped on her high-heeled mules and click-clacked over to where Melanie stood. Facing the pool, she bent at the waist and slid the shoes off. Then, with flawless form, she dove smoothly into the shallow water. When she emerged, she tipped her head forward and then snapped it back, sending her hair arcing gracefully and creating a spray of water droplets that fanned out into the air. I was captivated. I'd seen that move in ads, but never in person. It was mesmerizing. In a single fluid movement, Rhiannon pushed herself up out of the water and onto the deck. She faced Melanie with water streaming down her body, then reached up to brush her hair away from her face, subtly highlighting her chest as she did so. After that, she slipped her mules back on, gaining a 4-inch boost, and strolled back to me, leaving me spellbound. Reluctantly, I tore my gaze from Rhiannon to check Melanie's reaction. Melanie was glaring daggers at me. She turned sharply to Frank, said something I couldn't catch, and then gathered her things and marched off to the exit. Frank followed her, glancing back at Rhiannon over his shoulder. Rhiannon settled onto the lounge chair, eyes closed. I barely heard her murmur, "Mission accomplished." Only one thing went wrong that afternoon. As we were getting ready to leave, I looked up and saw Penny heading in my direction. Damn, I thought. I totally forgot that Penny's women's team was playing today. What do I say to her? "Hi, Michael," Penny called out, beaming. "I'm so happy to see you out and about again. Maybe we can meet up for another game sometime." She abruptly stopped as Rhiannon stood and gripped my arm. Penny's eyes went wide. "Oh," she said, surprised. "And who is this?" This is Rhiannon, my date," I said awkwardly. Penny blinked and took a moment, then offered her hand. "I'm Penny," she introduced herself. "Nice to meet you." She looked back at me. "I need to go clean up. Our match left me feeling pretty gross. See you around, Michael." She hurried away before I could figure out what to say. "Who was that?" Rhiannon asked, curious. "That's Penny Pennington," I replied. "She's my mixed doubles partner." Interesting," was all she said. I mentally kicked myself for not planning how to handle Penny's appearance. I didn't want to give away my own agenda, and I also didn't want Penny to misunderstand the situation. Damn. Shortly after that, Rhiannon and I decided to call it a day. I felt like we'd achieved every goal I'd set for the afternoon. As we left the pool area, I swear the volume of conversation rose noticeably behind us. Back at my place, I let Rhiannon use my shower while I dried off and reflected on the day's events. Aside from the unexpected run-in with Penny, things had gone even better than I'd hoped. I'd shown Melanie I wasn't going to wallow in misery over her leaving me. More than that, I'd made it clear she was replaceable. No, that I'd even traded up. Let her chew on that for a while, I thought with satisfaction. "So how do you think it went?" said a voice behind me. I turned to see Rhiannon wrapped in a towel. "You were perfect," I said, thrilled. "You were more than I ever could have hoped for." She twirled her fingers, and just like that, the towel fell to the floor. "Care to celebrate?" she asked, a playful gleam in her eye. For a moment, I stood there, struggling to collect my thoughts. Rhiannon had an undeniable presence, confident and poised in every detail. She carried herself with elegance, her athletic build a testament to her dedication and strength. I realized I'd been holding my breath and exhaled softly. Gathering my composure, I stepped forward, picked up the towel she'd dropped, and handed it to her. "I'm sorry, Rhiannon. This just isn't the right time." She smiled knowingly. "It's fine. I was just testing." Draping the towel over her shoulder, she walked away. I couldn't help but appreciate how composed she always seemed, no matter the situation. Later, when she returned, fully dressed and ready to leave, I handed her a sealed envelope. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "Today was exactly what I needed." She tilted her head thoughtfully. "Do you want to get back together with Melanie?" she asked unexpectedly. I shook my head firmly. What she did wasn't just a mistake. It was a deliberate choice to push me away. I've moved on. That's what I thought, Rhiannon said. Just checking. Anyway, we're still on for next week, right? Absolutely, I replied with a grin. Over the following week, I made an effort to re-engage with the world around me. At the tennis club, I wanted everyone to see that I wasn't retreating anymore. Glad to have you back, the team captain said with a nod of approval. My teammates greeted me warmly with encouraging words and light-hearted jokes. It felt good to be moving forward. A couple of days later, during mixed doubles practice, Penny was absent. Our captain said she'd called in sick. Concerned, I decided to check in on her. "Are you okay, Penny?" I asked over the phone. "It's not like you to miss practice." "Just a little under the weather," she replied lightly. "Nothing serious." "Let me know if you need anything," I offered. "I'd be happy to help." "No, really, I'm fine," she said with a gentle laugh. "But thanks for checking in." I let it go, but couldn't shake the feeling that something was bothering her. Penny was always so full of energy, and seeing her out of sorts was unusual. That weekend, the club hosted a potluck dinner, and Rhiannon and I planned to attend. When she arrived, her appearance was stunningly polished, exuding confidence. "Wow, you look fantastic," I exclaimed. "Thank you," she said with a playful smile. "Tonight I'm focusing on making connections and maybe stirring the pot a little." When we arrived at the clubhouse, we decided to split up to mingle. Rhiannon had a knack for navigating social situations, and as expected, she quickly drew attention. Both men and women were intrigued by her charisma and sense of style. Later, as we regrouped over dinner, I asked, "How's it going?" She leaned in and whispered, "I've learned a lot about what people think about Melanie and her choices. Let's just say she's not having a great night." I couldn't help but smile. Rhiannon knew exactly how to handle these situations. During a conversation with a teammate, Melanie approached me, visibly upset. "Seems you've wasted no time moving on," she said sharply. "I wasn't aware there were rules about that," I replied evenly. "Well, good luck keeping up with someone like her," Melanie shot back. "Don't worry about me," I said calmly. "I'm doing just fine." She glared at me for a moment before walking away in frustration. I could tell that everything was falling into place as planned. As the evening went on, I noticed Penny helping with the event. Relieved to see her, I walked over and gently touched her arm. She smiled when she saw me, her cheeks slightly flushed. "Feeling better?" I asked, genuinely concerned. "Much?" she said with a nod. "Thanks for checking in earlier. It means a lot." "I'm so happy you're feeling better," I told her. "You should have called to let me know you were well enough to come tonight. I really wasn't sure until the last minute, Michael. Besides, I assumed you'd be here with your new friend, and I didn't want to intrude." Just then, Rhiannon passed by, laughing and chatting with one of my teammates. "And I see I was right," Penny continued, her expression clouding. She started to move away, but I gently caught her arm. "Wait, Penny. We still need to discuss our next match." She paused, then seemed to make up her mind. "About that, Michael, my schedule's gotten really hectic, and I've decided to focus solely on the women's team." I was taken aback. "You can't do that, Penny," I blurted. "You're my partner. Who am I supposed to play with?" Penny glanced over my shoulder, and following her gaze, I saw Rhiannon standing there. "You'll find someone, Michael," Penny said softly. "Now please let go. I need to get this food out." As soon as I released her arm, she hurried away. Rhiannon took my hand and led me to an empty table. Once we were seated, she leaned in and whispered, "Just so you know, that girl has feelings for you." "What? No way, that's ridiculous. She's my tennis partner. She used to be in Melanie's Pilates class." Ignoring me, Rhiannon continued, "And if I'm not mistaken, you might feel the same way about her." "No," I insisted. "You've got it all wrong. She's just a good friend." Maybe, Rhiannon replied skeptically. Anyway, I think we've done enough for tonight. Let's head out. When we got back to my place, I asked Rhiannon to tell me what had happened with Melanie and Frank. She gave me a sly smile. I wandered over to their food station and tried some of their dishes, complimenting them. Melanie clearly didn't like me being there, but she couldn't really say anything. Then I told her how much I liked her outfit, and she had no choice but to return the compliment. That was my chance to let her know where I'd bought mine. I could tell she recognized the brand and knew it cost a lot. She kept quiet, but her discomfort was obvious. That sounds exactly like Melanie, I said. She's very into fashion and takes pride in her style. Right then, Rhiannon continued. Another woman asked Melanie to help out in the kitchen. Melanie didn't want to go, but she had to, leaving me alone with Frank. Once she was gone, I kept things casual but let him know I was interested in hearing about his hobbies. It didn't take much for him to start talking. Wow, I said, impressed. No wonder Melanie was so tense. I do what I can, she said with mock modesty. I can't believe Frank actually took the bait, I said. She gave a knowing laugh. Sometimes people let their egos guide them. It's fascinating to watch. I handed Rhiannon her envelope. Think we're ready for the next step? I asked. Absolutely. The dance at your club will be perfect for our plans. She turned and headed toward the front door. What? No witty remark as you leave? I teased. Glancing over her shoulder, she grinned. I wouldn't dream of it. Then she gave a playful wave and stepped outside. After she left, I sat down to think about everything that was going on. On one hand, I felt great about how smoothly the plan was unfolding. Even though Melanie no longer wanted me, I knew she wasn't thrilled about how quickly I'd moved on, and that gave me some satisfaction. Still, I couldn't shake my unease over the whole Penny situation. Could Rhiannon be right? I wondered. Do I really have feelings for Penny? I'd liked her ever since Melanie first introduced us. I found her appealing. Lean, athletic, graceful, with a vibrant, outgoing personality. But I'd always made sure to keep things strictly friendly, just tennis partners, out of respect for Melanie. And I'd assumed Penny wanted the same, especially while she was still dealing with her own challenges. I thought about what Rhiannon had said about Penny. Could it actually be true? If Penny was interested in me, why was she avoiding me so completely? And why did her avoidance bother me this much? For that matter, why had I repeatedly turned down opportunities to deepen my connection with others? Could my feelings for Penny be influencing all this? In the end, I gave up and went to bed. I didn't have any answers, and even if I did, I wouldn't have known what to do with them. I decided it would be best to stick to my original plan and keep moving forward. The annual spring dance at the club was always a highlight of the season and drew a big crowd. The women made a point of dressing up, and the men reluctantly pulled on their sports coats. Some even wore ties. I was counting on seeing Frank and Marlene there. I'd given Rhiannon a heads up on what to expect, and I was curious about what she'd choose to wear for the grand finale of our plan that night. When she arrived, I was surprised and amused to see her in casual jeans and a t-shirt. Granted, they fit her perfectly, but I'd expected something more formal. Reading my expression, she laughed. You didn't think I'd risk my dress while driving over, did you? Just let me use your bedroom for a bit, and then I'll be ready. I'd already put on my sports coat and slacks, so I waited patiently in the den while she got changed. Damn, I chuckled to myself. It's almost like we're an old married couple. After a few minutes, she emerged in a stunning dress that left me momentarily speechless. Well? She asked, smiling. Will I do? You look amazing, I said honestly. She laughed lightly. Good. Now let's get to the club. We've got work to do. A few minutes later, she emerged once more. This time she was wearing a strapless dress in the same cream shade as the trim of her lingerie, creating a flawless contrast with her hair. As she made her way across the floor, I realized the gown must have been tailor-made for her. The fabric glided over her body like flowing water. With each step, the muscles in her thighs were clearly defined, and when she turned, the curves of her backside were unmistakable. The dress had a slit that rose just below the top of her stockings, and if she struck the right pose, the sight of her perfect leg had a stunning effect. Of course, knowing exactly what she wore underneath didn't help my blood pressure one bit. I swallowed hard. "You may end up causing a few heart attacks tonight," I told her, not at all joking. She gave me a knowing smile and offered her arm, inviting me to escort her outside. For the dance, the club's patio had been cleared, and paper lanterns were strung overhead. It was a bit tacky, perhaps, but I found myself enjoying the soft, glowing light and the gentle music tinkling in the background. Rhiannon slipped into my arms, and I wasn't surprised that she danced far better than I did. As we moved, she rested her head on my shoulder, and in that moment I decided I didn't care if she was a working girl. I simply enjoyed the warmth of her body against mine and the pleasure of her company. Lifting her head, she leaned back slightly to look at me. "You know, suburban life isn't so bad," she said. "A girl could get used to it." Before I could respond, she stiffened. "Oh, battle stations." I turned just in time to see Frank Calhoun approaching with a very reluctant Melanie in tow. "Hello, Rhiannon. Hello, Michael," he announced loudly. "So glad you could join us this evening. How about we switch partners for a dance or two?" When I agreed, he whisked Rhiannon away, leaving Melanie and me standing there, both a bit uncomfortable. I held out my arms. "Care to dance for old time's sake?" Reluctantly, she agreed. As the new song began, we started to move together. It was a strange moment. I had loved this woman and been married to her for a decade. Yet now, after everything that had happened, all I felt was a pressing urge for her to understand the pain she had caused me. "So, was our marriage really that terrible?" I asked. She sighed. "No, Michael, it wasn't. We had some good years, some good moments. But then we slipped into routine, and after a while I just didn't feel excited about our relationship anymore. When Frank came along, and it was so clear how much he wanted me, I got swept up in it. I fell hard, Michael. It reminded me of how I felt back in college." She looked up at me. "I didn't want to hurt you, Michael, but I had to do what felt right for me. Can you understand that?" "I understand," I said bitterly. "You decided to trade up." "That's not what I meant," she protested. "It's fine," I said. "I've traded up too." She flinched, remembering who I was with now, and I felt a small satisfaction. If everything went as I hoped later on, I'd be even more satisfied. I looked up and saw Frank and Rhiannon approaching us, linked arm in arm. "Here's your date back, Michael," Frank said with a slight grin. "Have a great night." Then he wandered off, with Melanie hurrying to keep up. Rhiannon and I started dancing again. "How did it go?" I asked quietly into her ear. I could hear the satisfaction in her tone. "The bait is firmly set," she murmured. "He's completely convinced I'm attracted to him. He's going to ditch Melanie and meet me at the clubhouse once everyone clears out. I'm a bit nervous about that part," I admitted. "The timing needs to be perfect. Leave that to me. Women know how these things work." She licked my ear then, sending a helpless shiver through me. As the evening wore on, I noticed the crowd thinning quickly. I must have been scanning the area because Rhiannon caught me. "Sorry, Michael," she said. "I don't think Penny made it tonight." "Am I that obvious?" I asked. "Like glass," she answered with a small smile. Back at my house, I reached into my pocket and handed Rhiannon another envelope. "I might not get another chance to give you this," I said, and I wanted to be sure you received it." She took it, somewhat reluctantly it seemed, and studied me for a moment. Then her expression changed. The seductive enchantress vanished, revealing a real, though still stunning woman. "This has been the strangest job I've ever had," she said, "and you're not like any other client I've worked for. It's been a bit frustrating at times." I blushed. "But I've enjoyed it thoroughly." Holding both her hands, I said, "When I set out for revenge, I knew I needed someone extraordinary. I never imagined finding someone like you, and I'll never forget you." Without warning, I leaned in and kissed her. She held the kiss for a few seconds, then pulled away abruptly. Blinking rapidly, she said hurriedly, "Can't mess up my lipstick." Glancing at the jeweled watch on her wrist, she added, "It's almost time. We need to move. Give me precisely 30 minutes. With that, she stepped out the door, got in her car, and drove away. I stood there for a moment, then made a decision. Rhiannon and I hadn't discussed this, and I risked ruining everything. But I had no choice. I pulled out my cell phone. She must have recognized my number. "Michael, why are you calling so late?" Penny answered. "Penny, I'm about to ask the biggest favor of my life. Please don't ask any questions. Just meet me at the clubhouse in 30 minutes. "What's going on, Michael? What is this about?" she asked, bewildered. "Please, Penny," I pleaded. "I don't have time to explain, trust me. Come in 30 minutes, I'm sorry, I have to go." I hung up. As I headed toward the clubhouse on foot, I wondered if she would show up. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. When I arrived at the parking lot, I saw 2 cars parked there. I took out my phone and made another call. "Frank?" Melanie's frustrated voice answered. "Where are you?" "It's not Frank," I said. "It's Michael." "Michael, what do you want and why are you calling so late?" she demanded. "I'm calling because I know where Frank is. He's with Rhiannon." "What?" she gasped. "Where are they?" "Just meet me at the clubhouse as fast as you can." Then I ended the call. Frank's place wasn't far from the clubhouse, but Melanie must have hurried, because I soon spotted her cutting through someone's backyard. I intercepted her before she reached the building. "Where is he?" she asked angrily. "Be quiet," I said, gesturing for her to follow. "We need to stay calm if we want to handle this properly." I guided her to the clubhouse entrance, which was fortunately unlocked, and we quietly stepped inside. As we crept into the lounge area, we caught the sound of muffled voices. Melanie's eyes widened, and I motioned for her to stay calm. Together, we moved toward the light switch. The moment I flicked it on, the room was flooded with light. Frank and Rhiannon were caught off guard, looking startled. Melanie's emotions boiled over. "How could you do this to me?" she cried. "We're supposed to be getting married." Frank hesitated, then turned to Rhiannon. "Let's go," he said, avoiding Melanie's gaze. Rhiannon nodded but paused to face Melanie. "Listen, Melanie," she said gently. "You deserve better. You deserve someone who respects you." Melanie was stunned into silence as Rhiannon left, leaving Frank trailing after her. The room was heavy with tension. Penny appeared moments later, her expression resolute. "You're better off without him," Penny said firmly to Melanie. "Sometimes things fall apart so better things can come together." Melanie's tears flowed freely, but she didn't resist when Penny helped her to her feet. "Maybe you're right," she whispered, her voice shaky. I stayed silent, hoping this would mark a turning point for all of us. Penny turned toward me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Is that actually true?" she asked. "She's really not your girlfriend?" "No," I said quietly. "She was only my partner in the trap we set for Frank and Melanie, nothing more." "But she's so beautiful," Penny protested. "I could never measure up to someone like her." Rhiannon stepped over and placed her hands on Penny's shoulders. "You silly thing, I never stood a chance. He's always had eyes only for you." Penny looked back at me uncertainly. You mean you never even... Rhiannon cut in again. No, Penny, he never did. I could never distract him from you long enough to make a move. And believe me, I tried. Penny said nothing, but the look she gave me was filled with a bright, happy light. Rhiannon flashed both of us a grin. I think I'll take my leave. I've had tougher gigs, but somehow this one has worn me out. Just then, Melanie got up off the floor. What about me? Where am I supposed to go? I can't go back to Frank's place after this. Penny studied her for a moment. I'm not sure what your plans are for tomorrow, but you can stay at my place tonight. I'll be going home with Michael. She kissed me firmly, and I took her hand, determined not to release it. Something still nagged at me, though, so I turned to Rhiannon. What about Frank? Where exactly did you send him? She laughed. That address I gave him belongs to a gay bar I know. I wonder how long he'll wait there before realizing I'm not coming. Then her laughter faded, and she looked at me earnestly. Good luck, Michael. You're a special man, and I won't forget you. She leaned in and gave me a gentle kiss. Penny's hand tightened around mine. Rhiannon then fixed Penny with a fierce stare. You take good care of him, got it? If I ever hear otherwise, I'll come back, and this time I won't accept no for an answer. That fierce look vanished, replaced by what I would later understand as sadness. She reached out and patted my cheek. Not that I think I'll get that lucky, she murmured. Digging into her purse, she pressed something into my hand. Goodbye, she said, and then strutted out the door, hips swaying. I opened my hand and found 4 unopened envelopes inside.